Welcome to this episode of Inspired Conversations, a place for women who are daring to make a life they love, to share their journey and expertise so that we all can grow. I never really know what we're going to talk about in these sessions, and that's part of the magic. I'm Lindsay Davis, your host today and coach for heart-centered creative leaders. I help women become who they need to be to get their big idea off the ground without hating their life in the process. With me today is my guest, Karina Antonopoulos. She is my friend and a great relationship coach for highly sensitive women who are committed to making their intimate relationship work, but don't know the first step in making a change. Her clients desire peacefulness and joy in the relationship, but often feel stuck in conflict, blame, and resentment with their partner, leading to distrust and doubt as to whether or not the relationship can survive. Through the coaching process and her Synchronize Your Life modules, her clients now feel like nothing can tear their relationship apart. That's pretty powerful. And after the episode, if you're someone who consistently finds yourself being confused about what you want, or you simply don't know what you want because the wants of others always seem to be more important, Karina's invitation is to go to hspleaders.com for a powerful masterclass on how to create your vision and thrive as a highly sensitive person. Karina, thank you so much for being here today for this conversation.
Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much for having me. Excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to begin as well. Karina, for me, is one of those friends, colleagues that we probably go back to that junior high-esque energy of stop talking. Okay, no more talking. Okay, one more thought, and then we're done. I know for us, conversations just tend to flow and go wild and crazy, like vines going everywhere. But I always appreciate what we come away with.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I know. I feel like it's just so beautiful when you can just go in so many different directions in a conversation with someone. I think someone told me once, so I'm a Gemini. So I guess the thing with Geminis is they're good communicators. And when I can find someone else who's at that communication level with me, I love it. So thank you for being that person.
Yeah, so fun. So fun. Yeah. And it's fun to play in my Sagittarius world, like fire signs. So air and fire, crazy.
We feed each other.
I know. All right. So Karina, you're a relationship coach and a mentor for high sensation seeking, highly sensitive people. I would be curious to hear what your view is on relationships, what they symbolize, their importance. Any thoughts you have on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at the essence, I do believe that we are in relationship with everything. So typically when I say the word relationship, people think of my relationship to someone else, but really it all stems from our relationship to ourselves. And really the way we are in relationship to ourselves is how we are then going to be in relationship to other people, as well as to our work, as well as to the universe or God, however, whatever it is you believe is higher than you. We can also be in relationship with our food, our body, our money, our space, right? So our emotions, we are in relationship with everything. And, the beautiful thing is that if you're someone who's on that path of growth and development, when you allow yourself to grow in one area of relationship and have a breakthrough, then it creates an opening for you to have a breakthrough in another relationship area as well. But just bringing that awareness into that area, that is just that step that you have to take. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the work that I do is facilitating that space for people to peel back the layers and see where the patterns are. Because really when we're in relationship, that's the biggest thing, is looking at our patterns that keep us stuck, and we loop around over and over and over again. And, it's not a bad thing that we are repeating patterns. It's just, we're repeating it so that, because we keep missing it, right? Just like a boomerang, right? Even just like opportunities that the universe is going to send us, even if it's an awesome relationship, we completely missed it, the universe is going to send it back, right? So positive things, the universe will send back. and maybe not so enjoyable things. But if it's meant to be something we're going to look at, the universe will keep sending it back to us.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you brought into patterns with it and really starting to have some awareness and understanding around patterns so that you can do it differently. I know from experience you're masterful at that in your work. For today, is it okay if we talk about relationships with other people?
Yeah, that's
okay.
One of my favorites.
Awesome. So good. So one question I know that I receive a lot, and okay, the question comes in different forms, but it's really around this wanting the other person to change. Either wanting them to see it my way, or really just wanting something for them that they don't really see or want for themselves. Do you hear this come up in your work?
So very interesting. I probably heard it more when I was experiencing that in my relationship. So we'll say that. So certain patterns kind of stop coming around, I feel like, when I have really moved through them, but they do definitely for sure come up. Just sharing from my own experience, I feel like a lot of new relationships, or even relationships that, you're still getting to know each other. So even if you're together 10 years and you haven't really done the work to get to know each other, I still call it a new relationship. And so in a lot of new relationships, that's what happens, is we say we want something in a relationship, and then we have this expectation for this other person to meet that and fulfill that. Mm-hmm. And then we're usually disappointed because we have this expectation, and we're disappointed and angry, and then we feel like unfulfilled in a relationship. We're like, this person is supposed to fulfill this part of me, or, to be this person that I want them to be. When really that's not why we're in relationship.
Why for you are we in relationship?
Yeah. So for me, I believe we're in relationship to learn about ourselves and to grow. Relationships are mirrors for us to show us what we cannot see for ourselves. So I do believe that, we have certain friends who we have a lot of fun with, and they're mirroring to us a fun part of ourselves. And then we have our intimate partner who can be very passionate with, who maybe we get very angry with and controlling. And, they're showing us another side of ourselves. And we like to think that we only want to be one side of the spectrum, like all the positive side, right? But really, we're a whole spectrum of human being. Even someone, and I hate to make such an extreme analogy, but even someone who kills people, right? Whatever pattern is in them is in us. It's just we don't choose to act on that, but it's in us. And so that's partly where I see, especially with relationship, we bring in the topic of compassion, is like knowing that like what is in you is in me. And if I can see it in you, then I know it is in me. So when I see it in you and it's something that triggers me, usually the trigger is an indicator that I don't know that it's in me. Yeah. So that's a huge, I know we're getting deep quickly,
we
Lindsay.
Are. It happens. It happens with us. This is, but so it's almost like that trigger becomes a place of awareness and almost faith, like it's in you, even though you cannot see it yet.
Yeah, but knowing that, just knowing, like me sharing this with you right now, if there's anything that triggers you, if you could just be aware that like, if I'm seeing this in you, then it's probably something in me also. I feel like having that awareness at least helps me feel a little bit less like of that control, that like I don't need to fix or change them or expect them to be a certain way. Either, there's something in me that I need to either accept or shift myself. And what I've seen for myself is that, especially with my partner, we're so connected that if I shift, he shifts. And I have so many examples of when this has happened. And that's the beautiful thing about being connected to someone. There's in quantum science, they call this the morphogenetic field, right? We're in this field with someone who we choose to be in relationship with. And so when it's kind of like in the science, they talk about it in regards to the atoms, right? So the atoms they're like kind of split, and they're brought to two different parts, two different rooms or whatever. But when you manipulate one, the other one shifts as well. So same thing kind of happens there. So if you're having a connection with someone in this field, if you will, then when you shift, they're going to shift.
Mm-hmm.
And so who's going to be the first person to shift, right? The person with the awareness.
Yeah.
And that sucks, right? It was like, oh, I always have to be the bigger person. Oh, I hate you, right? But it's like, you have the power. Your awareness is your power.
Yeah. And would you trade your responsibility because you're aware for unawareness?
Would I?
No, I mean, like just in general, right? Like would
Right.
we want to be the unaware one? But
right.
I've been that person and it's hard too.
It is hard. And I feel like for me, when I was the unaware one in the relationship, that was the relationship I was the most hurt, because he was more aware, and I don't know if he thought his intentions were good or not, but it was very manipulative to me, and he knew he could control me because I was very much the good girl and wanted to be of service and unconditionally love this person. But so that's the other thing is, if you have someone who's more aware than you, then like make sure their intentions are good, right? Because otherwise you can get stuck in one of those relationships where, you know, kind of like that codependent narcissist type combination.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just a relationship like that for me has expanded my awareness even more, that like I do want to be the more aware person, because I know my intentions are always going to come from a place of love, and I don't want to be in a relationship with someone who is going to be so aware that they can manipulate me more than I can understand and see myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is a really important topic for heart-centered, highly sensitive people, because not that highly sensitives are any more or less perfect or great than others, but because of their sensitivity, I've seen a real conscientiousness about how they are in the world and not causing harm and not causing hurt to others. And as a result, it's really important for them to see themselves as a leader in the relationship and that person that's very aware. Have you seen that in working with highly sensitives as well?
For people who want to be a leader?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I mean, I would say the majority of the people I work with, they are very aware and they're very service oriented, very heart centered. But I would say for the people that I work with who are challenged with that, it's because their ego is actually not strong enough. And, you know, we always like to think in the spiritual world, they're like, oh, your ego's bad, get rid of your ego. But actually we need a healthy ego, and we need to know when to tap in, when to bring the ego into the conversation. The ego is the part of you that distinguishes you from the person in front of you. It gives you an identity separate from the other person. And so a lot of heart-centered people can really get stuck in the emotions of others and be taken over by what other people are feeling and what they want, and they forget completely what we want. But if we have a healthy ego, we're consistently saying what we want, we consistently know what's right for us, and we can discern and say, okay, you're feeling that and I'm feeling this, and I'm going to hold space for you, but I'm not going to be in that with you. I'm going to be with you, but not in it with you.
Cool. Yeah, I love this. And I also advocate not demonizing the ego. How does this play out with communication? Because I know that's a really important piece of communication and setting boundaries, and even communicating expectations or agreements that we can make in a relationship. So do you have any thoughts around how we could communicate strongly, how we can really communicate from our power, but also communicate kindly?
Mm-hmm. So in regards to communication, I would say just kind of bringing up the awareness of the difference between agreement and expectation. And I know Lindsay and I, we talked about this a bunch, and that was a huge breakthrough for me in my relationship, was the difference between an unsaid agreement is an expectation, right? And so an agreement is a spoken word and where you're meeting halfway with someone and you're saying what you want, you're saying what you need, and you're allowing them to say what they want and need. And then together you create that agreement. But so often, a lot of our communication patterns and challenges comes from the fact that we are, first of all, making assumptions, and then creating expectations. And then when those unsaid expectations aren't met, that's when the anger comes and the frustration, and you're not the partner I want you to be. Why don't you be more like this? Right? You're not, maybe we're not compatible, or you don't know how to communicate with me. I hear that a lot. So I think one of the biggest lessons we could learn as highly sensitive people is to practice being clear on what we want, and then communicating that to our partner, to our friends, to our family, so that we can create more agreements rather than these unsaid expectations.
Yeah, Karina, this was a game changer for me too, this distinction, and realizing that really when it comes to negotiating, we have like a clear understanding sometimes professionally what that looks like. And somehow there gets to be this feeling in relationships, like with my committed partner, my husband, whoever, my sis, I don't have a sister, my brother. But yeah, that they should just know. They know me, they should just know. And yeah, if we can look at, like you just so clearly demonstrated, two really jobs, if I can put it that way, that we have as being like a self-leader is really, one, get clear what you want. Half the time, that's really where I know I need to start. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I want from the other person or the situation. So get clear what I want, and then willing to say that out loud to the other person. And then we alluded to it, but allow the other person to have the space too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like there's so many steps here. And I would even say the steps that you just said, right? Say what we want, acknowledge what we want and then say it, I think is like step 2 and 3. So if we could have like a step 1 and 0 is like create the space. And then sometimes we can't even create the space for ourselves. So that's why, maybe we'll join a community or have a coach to help us create the space, right? Yeah. Because it's not something we're taught. And so we kind of have to be immersed in that, where everyone is practicing doing it until it becomes that practice for us. So, right. So it's like be in that environment first where people are doing it, creating space for themselves. And then being in that environment will then help you get clear, right? And then they'll ask you those questions. What do you want? What do you need right now? Those are like 2 big questions that I'm constantly reminding my clients to ask themselves. What do I need right now? Mm-hmm. And then it's like having that space, asking those questions, you get clear, and I'm saying this very logically and very linearly. And I only say that to keep it simple. And I know that it doesn't always, it's not always executed simply or like beautifully, but it gives us a system. And I feel like when we're in a space of chaos and overwhelm, having a system to come back to that works, it helps bring us back. Because especially me with my Gemini air sign, right? I can be all over the place, very airy. And so these systems ground me. And that's something I crave, is just like this grounded energy of clarity. And then we can then meet on that middle path with that other person.
Yeah, having developed a personal system that keeps us grounded. That's so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the primary. And I feel like that's primarily, at least what I feel like I've learned from you is that's a lot of the work you do, Lindsay. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like creating that space and teaching people how to create that space and listening to that. Like, what do I, going within.
Yeah,
so
it is so important, that creating of space. And it's kind of a practice. Like you learn to sort of do it when it doesn't matter, so to speak, as much. It matters, but it's not as triggering or difficult. So that I think you can then have that capacity, that familiarity with what it feels like to do it when you are triggered or when it is more challenging. Nothing has been harder for me, and you could probably echo this too. I don't have like the most peaceful, relationship history where, we just have always agreed on everything and everything is just so zen in my house. No.
No.
We're pretty fiery. Um, so that practice of learning how to slow down and create space has served so that I can better know what that feels like to do that in a conversation. How to put the brakes on a train wreck coming of a conversation. Have you ever had that in your relationship too? Like where you have to just really say, okay, pause.
Oh my goodness. And it's funny because, I call it just reactive mode, right? Just that fireball reactive mode where we're just firing back at each other. And until one of us is willing to step back and be like, this isn't working, right? And that my husband actually has, I feel like I've done that enough times in a relationship for my husband now to be like, can we stop this? Like, this isn't working. Or like, are you done? Which kind of makes it a little bit like, it's like trying to like loosen it up as like, make it a little bit lighter. But of course, when I'm in that angry space, I'm just constantly reacting. And I noticed that, yeah, I'm way more reactive when I'm not giving myself that space consistently, to just be with myself, to check in with myself. It's not even like going to a full yoga class, which obviously when I do that, I'm even, higher state of presence, but literally just taking a breath and coming back to now and feeling my feet and tuning into that light in my heart and consulting with that heart and be like, all right, what's really going on here? What do I need to do? What is my next step? And asking a question like that, like really helps for me slow things down in the moment very quickly.
Yeah.
Because people all the time say,
you can't go to yoga class right in the middle of an argument.
Exactly. Right. We can't just like, excuse me, I'll be right back. I'm going to go to yoga and then we can continue this. No, that doesn't happen. Like right in the moment, we need to have these like important tools and skills of how to bring ourselves back and kind of have that bird's eye view and zoom out when something is just, you just see yourself spiraling into something that's just going to get worse and worse until someone stops it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important. With this idea of committed relationships, I know this is something that's really been on your mind and in your work lately. Do you think, ready for a challenging question?
I'm ready.
Okay. Do you think it is possible to outgrow your partner in a committed relationship, and maybe your thoughts on that?
Okay. Definitely something I've thought about. So let me just give my parents as an example. So my mom was always the much more aware person, always bringing the relationship forward. And it's very interesting because my dad was always like dragging his feet, resisting, and then, you know what? There's something at the last minute, my dad would switch and he'd go zip, and he'd like, kind of like a zipper, just like zip right up. And I wonder if like that was his strategy, like his unconscious strategy of like, I don't need to do all this work that you're doing because you're doing it, but I know that the minute I decide to, I'm going to zip up to where you are, and you're going to keep moving forward. But like, I don't know, like, and I saw that with my parents, but in those moments of like zipping up, as I call it, I feel like those are moments when we kind of fall in love with our partner again. And for me, my husband, we've been together about 10 years, and there have been moments where we've kind of like re-fallen in love with each other. And I would say it's because, either he like kind of entrained, right? That's another word. It's like he kind of zoomed up to where I was, or I found a way, right? Because there are things that I'm like, spiritually speaking, maybe my husband was always lagging, but on the physical plane, when it comes to like being responsible about like with certain things with finances or like figuring out like house stuff, like very first chakra stuff, that's just not my area of his area of genius. But that is his. He's a very grounded person. Just certain things like that seem very natural to him. But more spiritual things are more natural to me. And so I feel like we have each other to teach the other side of the world, if you will, of the spectrum. And so it's like I guess I had fears that like, oh my God, what if I never, get to where I want to be with my life financially or my business, and then my husband stops respecting me as a wife because I'm not pulling my end. That was a big fear for me for a long time. But of course, if I just keep like telling that story, right, I just have to take the next step, and then that whole process will happen. But it's that shift, and you can't always say, I know I'm being a little vague, but like, you can't always say what that shift is going to be. But sometimes it's a decision. Sometimes it's making that same decision over and over again until the final time you're like, yes, and then it just zip.
I'm hearing it's a willingness.
A willingness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like a willingness to be in relationship and a willingness to be connected to that other person.
Yeah. And to be vulnerable, I feel like that's another part of it, is the zipping up often happens in moments where we're truly putting it all on the table with our partner and just be like, listen, this is what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And, vulnerability to me is like telling someone something without any promise of acceptance or validation. And that's a really scary place to be, right? Because all we might want from our partner is to be accepted or validated or loved.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, maybe if you put something on the table and it was judged, that's why we have that fear and we kind of close up our heart. But it's those moments of true vulnerability where we say something that we don't know how they're going to respond. Like, those are the moments that have brought me and my husband a lot closer and have brought us back from, just being so disconnected.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes vulnerability for me has looked like or sounded like being the one to say, I don't know how. I don't know how to reconnect. I don't know how to fix this. And then listening to that other person and what they have to say. And this is what's interesting, I think, sometimes in that feeling like I'm outgrowing my partner conundrum, or who is this person I'm married to? Like,
Right.
I don't even know this person anymore. I know for me, it's a little bit of like spiritual arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say that. I'm being like super
Yeah.
real here, but like, it's almost like I know better than they do what
Mm-hmm.
they need or what we need to do. And when I can slow down enough to see it as the arrogance that it is, and I can really just tell that other person, I don't know how. This is one idea that I have, but what do you think? It allows me to really love what is in that other person, just who they are, and appreciate that they do have a genius to them.
Yeah.
That's just different. It's just different than mine.
And
That's
that, I
really been
think,
a game changer. Yeah.
yeah, that is another breakthrough. I've seen certain breakthroughs in relationships, and that is another breakthrough. Like, there's one breakthrough in being vulnerable. There's another breakthrough in like unconditional acceptance for the other person, and like seeing that they have strengths. And even though, like, going back to our first question from our conversation, even though they're not who I want them to be, they're actually a lot better than the person I want them to be, because they're their own person. And if I can only see that and appreciate that, holy cow, like, imagine the beauty of what we could create then from that place.
Yeah.
Right. And so even what I shared before about me seeing how like maybe I'm not quote unquote measuring up on the first chakra stuff, that only came after my awareness of my spiritual arrogance, that like I thought I knew better, like, oh, my husband's not doing this. Yeah, but eventually I realized, but I'm not doing that. So, but he's not telling me, we're just arguing all the time. So it's like, I had to have that in my face of like, damn it. Like, yeah, I can see where I need to grow. And I think being in that place of willingness to grow and seeing that like, yeah, they have a place to grow, but we also do. And as long as I'm just focusing on my path, I feel like and both people have to be willing to grow though. That, and like being back to that willing and that desire, like you said, I don't know how to fix this, or I don't know what to do different, but like something's not working. Both people have to have the desire to stay in the relationship, no matter how messy it is. Still want to be there. And if there's one person that's like, I don't, like, there's just too many things, like, then like you can't change that feeling for someone. and you have to surrender. And what I like to say to some of my clients, which I've even said to myself sometimes, is like, when my husband hasn't been being the person that I want him to be, I'll tell the universe, this is the partner I want. Who are you going to send me? And every time the universe kept sending me my husband. So that says
So there's
something.
something
right
there. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, this idea of surrender too. I know there's been a misunderstanding that I have had, and I've seen it with other clients. Like, surrender means that I don't care.
Yeah.
When it really just is an acknowledgement, like, that's not mine to change.
Right.
And I think that prayer to the universe or prayer to God really allows us to care deeply and acknowledge that, you know what, them changing isn't my business.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's me that needs to change, maybe the
My
situation,
perspective.
my
Right.
perspective. Yeah. I'm open to a shift,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what form that comes in. I'm just
Right.
open to a shift.
Yeah. And I say that, okay, let's just make one distinction.
Okay.
So I was in a relationship where I said to myself, okay, I have the awareness that maybe I need to be the one who needs to shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this other person was not willing to shift.
Yeah.
And so in a relationship like that, I would say that's not a healthy relationship. But with my current partner, I can say that I need to look at what I need to shift, because I know that if I shift, he's going to shift.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some relationships where you shift and the other person is just continuing the same patterns and they have no awareness or no willingness to change. Like, they have to want to. And if they're not wanting to, those are the really hard relationships to be in.
Yeah, I appreciate you making that distinction, because I think in this conversation, for the most part, you're in a committed, loving relationship. I am too at this time. And it's like, that's really where we're coming from in the context of this conversation. But that's not the case for
For a
all
lot of people.
relationships and a lot of people right now. And so I love that you made that disclaimer that sometimes there isn't a willingness on the other person. There's not a willingness to be in that relationship. There's not a willingness to change, to hear, to grow. There's not even a willingness to necessarily be kind or loving. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen.
And that's
hard.
one quality I remember I looked for in, because I did have a relationship like that for 2 years. And I was like, I don't want to be in a relationship like that again. And that was a really important distinction for me, kind of when I was, telling the universe, this is the partner I want.
Yeah.
This is something that's important to me, is someone who is willing to shift and grow and be adaptable with me, because I'm very adaptable, but I need another adaptable person. Otherwise I'm always adapting to them. And it's like codependent.
Mm.
So if I could be with someone who's adaptable with me, then we can then be in that interdependent place where they're compromising a little bit, I'm compromising, we're negotiating, we're getting agreements. But I would say both people have to be in that space of willingness to negotiate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. I love this conversation around relationships. There's so many places we could go with this, being
Oh,
conscious
yeah.
of the time as well. Just curious, Karina, what's up in your world maybe? What would you say right now, maybe in relationships, professionally or personally, what's super inspiring to you? Like, what are you digging right now?
Let me think about this for a minute. Well, I feel like different components come up a lot at different points, but I would say probably the word, which I actually mentioned earlier, I want to bring it back over. It's the word compassion. I feel like it's a word in a dictionary that people have heard, but they don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I've been really creating a teaching around, and I'd like to maybe share it a little bit here, because this is a concept that it's a way of understanding things. So when we're in a relationship with each other, I feel like there or different ways. So we have one way is kind of like, I'll start with quote unquote the negative one. So we have judgment, right? We can be interacting with someone and there be judgment, right? You're doing something and I'm judging you for it. Then we have guilt, right? There's an interaction and I feel guilty, right? We internalize it. So the first one is out. The second one is in. And then the next one is sympathy, where it's like something happens and I feel bad for you, right? Now it's like this, you're lower than me. I feel bad for you. And then we have empathy, which is something happens and I feel your pain with you, right? I'm not experiencing it, but I'm experiencing it because you're experiencing it. And I feel like that's where a lot of highly sensitive people or heart-centered people stop, right? Stop there. We're like, oh, we're empaths. This is my gift, you know, but as a self-leader who's also highly sensitive, we need to embrace the energy of an embodied compassion. And to me, compassion is like, I see you. I see what you're going through. And I know it's going to be okay. And here's this space. And to be able to hold space for someone, first of all, I'm only able to do that because of a lot of practice of holding space for myself, but also because I have a lot of people holding space for me at any time. I have a whole team of people I can go to. And that's why we need to kind of build up our reserves of support networks. And compassion is like, I see you. I see you. And I don't know how else to say that right now, but not needing to be in their pain with them, but seeing beyond the pain, seeing through it.
Yeah.
Instead of being there with them. And I would say that is something that's really, really starting to come clear for me. And I know compassion is used a lot in Buddhism, but like, just like the word grief for me, I was like, I know that that's a word in the dictionary. I don't really understand it until my father passed away. And then I was like, oh, that's grief. Hi, grief. So same thing with compassion. And I feel like compassion in relationships is one of the most important things. It's the thing that brings us back to our heart. And usually when we're lost in our relationship or disconnected, one of the only places we can reconnect is back in that heart, and compassion is how we get there.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought in this teaching. Thank you for sharing just a teeny bit with us today. This teaching for me, yeah, it's like this natural tendency. I'm a highly sensitive person, heart-centered, and I know empathy was like exactly what you said, the place where I stopped, where I hurt so badly with that other person. And as a result, I was really it's great for them to know that, you know, they're just not alone. But if we just stop there sometimes, like, one, now I feel completely horrible. I've now taken on their pain as my own. And I've forgotten that we have a deeper strength underneath to be able to offer. And that looks like you said, creating space, just holding space for them, not fixing, not advice giving, not minimizing their struggle, just holding space. I picture this like sitting with them, just sitting with them. And there was a quote, I have no idea where this quote came from, so it doesn't matter. But this quote of like, troubled, then stay with me, for I am not. And for me, this quote has embodied what it feels like inside to be in a compassionate state, to really acknowledge and see somebody that is going through something difficult, and then just to be able to hold my own grounding with them and offer that to them, like silently, like energetically, most of the time.
Yeah, beautiful, for sure. Not being triggered by it, right? Yeah.
And like
totally
you said, that's a practice. I mean, right. This I think is a really important topic to bring into relationships. Even being with somebody who is triggered, not even grief, like angry, upset, like, and being able to be with them in that space without confusing it as our own. And now I'm angry and upset just because they were angry and upset.
Right. And I would say, you know, sometimes it's, you know, I always like to say, like, I don't want to let go of my anger. And because as something I've done, I've really repressed it. So I do let myself get a little angry, but then there's a point where I'm like I take a step back and I say the word interesting. And so if I keep it interesting, then it's like, that's like my zoom out of like, interesting, we're arguing, you know, instead of like just being unconsciously zoomed into the argument and angry and unconsciously reacting. Just two different places to be in. And I think, you know, we're human. Let yourself be in that unconscious anger state and then pull out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Look at what's going on here. Zoom out and then, okay, let's move on.
That's such a great place to like really bring it back and ground it, is like have permission to be a human.
Yeah.
Like we talked about a lot of deep stuff today. Hopefully anybody listening can join in on our deep journey. But really at the end of the day, I think it's that reminder that like we all get to be a human. Like our partner, people in our world, and ourselves. Like we can give ourselves permission to be a human. And then slow down and see what's needed as well, because we also have that divine spark in us too, and that awareness. Yeah. It's kind of fun. All right, Karina, thank you so much for your time and being here. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for creating the space so that we could talk and connect. And hopefully, you know, I like to say with even very deep conversations, if anything in this conversation, if you're a listener right now, went over your head or whatever, you're like, what? Just know that your heart is listening and your heart is hearing it. So it'll come into your mind when it's repeated. Maybe you'll hear it in a different way. Maybe it's synchronicity, who knows? But that's what I always like to say is like, if you don't fully grasp something yet, it's okay. Just know your heart heard it. And that is what I know for each person who'll be listening.
Yeah, completely agree. Such a great reminder here. Listen like you're like listening to a piece of music. Like, yes. You're not trying to get anything from it.
Exactly. I love that analogy. I love it. Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah. So great.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.